Lloyds of London, the major insurance company, began in one of those coffee shops that I told you about back in the early 1600s. Again, it was a coffee shop founded by Edwin Lloyd, and it specialized in maritime insurance. Over the next 300 years, Lloyd's grew to be one of the world's major suppliers of specialized insurance. It's an interesting organization because it's funded by individuals. It's basically a market. And so Lloyd's provided a marketplace in which wealthy individuals could fund insurance for those in specialized occupations such as shipping. The people who were funding it were called the names. And of course, the company also included a number of professional brokers who were responsible for selling the insurance and managing the overall process. Now, I'd like you to think about the 1950s and the kinds of challenges that Lloyd's of London was facing at this point in time. This is a fascinating point in England's history. Obviously, World War II has ended, and England is being led by one of the most radical governments that it probably ever has been. Clement Attlee, the Labour leader, is in charge, and he's following the kinds of liberal economic policies prescribed by John Maynard Keynes. It's a time when he's using the power of the state to begin to socialize some of the industry and to provide some widespread benefits to many of its citizens. So we have, for example, national health care and compulsory education all coming into being. Another interesting thing that's happening is that business is booming. And so unemployment levels in London at this time are virtually nil. The unemployment level is so low that it becomes very difficult to find anyone to hire throughout the city. Consumer and worker expectations are rising. Workers begin to demand holidays and other benefits consistent with the overall philosophy that the government is projecting about taking care of its citizens. It's a time when this paternalistic point of view, both in the government and expected in corporations, becomes very much part of the ethos that surrounds Lloyd's and other companies doing business at this time. I should also mention that one of Attlee's important elements of his policy was to reduce extreme wealth. And so think about a company that's being funded by extremely wealthy people. What does that mean for the names that have been the backbone of Lloyd's for so many years? What's the critical question that Lloyd's had to follow? And how did they solve it to remain the important company that they are today? One important question, of course, is how to attract talented people. And so this is a time when we begin to see very substantial changes in employment practices, in the relationship, if you will, between people who work and people who employ them. Because now the people who work hold a lot of cards. They have power, and they're able to demand some pretty attractive benefits for working in your organization. We see greatly lengthening vacation times, for example, and a number of other benefits that begin to be made available to the workforce at this time. We see the advent of specialized departments focused on trying to attract and retain people. Personnel departments, today called human resources. We begin to measure retention rates. How long are people staying with us? Are we able to retain people for the time that we want? All of these kinds of people-oriented practices derive from a time when talent was short and when the switch toward being more paternalistic, providing more benefits, was very much in its heyday. And Lloyd's was able to rise to this challenge and attract the kind of talent they needed to succeed on into the future. By the way, they also changed their funding mechanism. Instead of having funding from rich individuals with unlimited liability, they began to move to other funding mechanisms that provided limited liability for those who invested. So that was a change that needed to be made at this time as well. Lloyd's, again, one of our iconic companies, with some interesting lessons here about the relationship between the employee and the employer.